Hey everybody, it's me again, checking in on Friday morning. So we have just finished Unit 9, which was a collection of fairly small things going on. Probably the bulk of your time was spent just reading the play, which is our final reading for the course. And hopefully you finished it at this point. If not, be sure to get through it all. So there was a couple of things going on in Unit 9. A basic discussion board, really to start brainstorming some of the important themes in the play. And you were also attaching a picture, and there were some really great choices. So some things that were, I think, great images that reflected the characters, but also some more sort of symbolic choices as far as reflecting mood or ideas or sort of tones that are happening in the play. So lots of really interesting stuff there. A number of people forgot to do the response part, so just be sure you're, doing all of the required work here. There's all the details for the final essay assignment, even though, like I mentioned before, we spend the better part of our class time now just working through various steps in the writing process, getting us towards that final unit when you're actually submitting the essay. So obviously you're starting to think about it now, getting the details for the assignment, but not having to deal with it as a final product right away, obviously. We have the benefit now of spring break coming up as well. That gives us a little extra time before our next unit is due. It is important to remember, though, that the essay assignments are here in Unit 9, and so even as we move away from Unit 9 and get further into the writing process, it's not a bad idea to check back into Unit 9 to make sure you have follow the guidelines as far as paper length, source requirements, topic guidelines, and all that kind of stuff. So you might in fact be referring back to Unit 9 a few times as we make our way through the writing process. Okay, you also then submitted a tentative essay topic, and like I'd mentioned before, clearly things are very tentative at this point for many people. You may not have finished the final reading yet. You may not have a really good sense of, certainly your thesis, but even maybe your topic, you're still floating a bit. So as I had mentioned, or as I mentioned at the start of Unit 10, you'll get a check mark for completing the topic assignment if you submitted something, but that doesn't mean I've checked off or signed off on the topic itself. So you've done the submitting part, which is good, but it doesn't mean that the topic itself is approved and okay and you're off to the races. In most cases, I would have provided feedback. Maybe it's questions or some comments. It could be little formatting things. It could be much bigger questions or suggestions of change of direction kind of thing. But it's really incumbent on you now to get that feedback and then be back in touch with me so we have sort of an ongoing dialogue as you're getting deeper into the writing process. So don't let that check mark for doing the submitting part lead you to believe that by default means that the topic as is okay. A number of people, and maybe again it's just because you haven't finished reading the play or you've just finished, so it's not kind of sitting with you yet. A number of people suggested topics that were really going back to things that we had read earlier in the course, and in some cases that people had already written about. And I really would steer you clear of that. You're certainly allowed to use things that we've used earlier, but you don't want to repeat yourself. And there's a number of things that the play has going for it that really makes it a favorable choice for doing this final essay, particularly because you're developing your own topic. So there's that new step in the process here. First of all, Death of a Salesman has lots going on in it, so there is lots of themes to draw from. So that's just an obvious kind of benefit right there. Another concern for us is obviously the research component, and in fact Death of a Salesman is again beneficial just in terms of the practical matter of it being a famous play. There's lots of database material, print reference material, so you don't run into any problems doing the research aspect of this final research paper. So you're not required to write on Death of a Salesman, but I strongly recommend it just because it does have so many things going for it. And again, especially because you're developing your own topic, you're kind of looking for a text that invites interpretation or has a lot of obvious themes that are emerging from it. One maybe caveat there is that one of the themes that a lot of people have identified and talk about, and that gets talked about in the research on, the secondary material on the play, so this is not just a student reading thing, is, of course, the notion of Death of a Salesman as an exploration of the American dream. And I've cautioned people directly, but I'll also say it sort of publicly for everybody, just don't write about the American dream. It's such an overused phrase that it means so much it means nothing. It's just too general, it's too vague. It sounds concrete, but it actually isn't. The more you get into it, the more nebulous and kind of all over the place it becomes. So usually what you can do is take that same approach and just substitute the American dream with some much more concrete phrase. So a lot of people talk about Willy Loman's, false ideals or delusions about the American dream, but just replace that. So is it his ideas of what it means to be successful, to be well-known or well-liked, have that kind of cult of personality or a sort of celebrity, which is, I think, maybe one of the most important themes in the play. He's clearly concerned with the idea of legacy, like leaving something behind for his sons. And those are much more particular things to talk about that I think you would actually find more useful to produce an essay that's, on topic, detailed, and unified from start to finish, whereas the American dream is just too big and you sort of run into all these different directions. You end up using different terms throughout the paper, so it loses that sense of focus and unity. So just stay away from the term the American dream. It's just too big and too kind of loose. But there's lots of more particular things that are still moving in that same direction that are a lot more productive. Okay, so continue that dialogue about your topic with me as we move into Unit 10 and, of course, the future units. So Unit 10 has you beginning an outline or draft, so really getting into some of the brainstorming planning phases of the essay writing process. You're not actually turning that outline in to me, which is, it sort of points to one of these things. I would never tell you, like, the writing process is this, you must do it this way, you must have this kind of an outline, you must brainstorm in this way. There's all those steps are possible, but really a writing process is more effective when it is tailored to what works for you and you're conscious of what is working and what isn't working. So if your writing process, get the assignment, do the essay, that's not going to work. It's not a process. There has to be some planning stages. Reading, research, outlining, drafting, outlining again, revising, all that kind of stuff. Make sure you're conscious of when you're doing those things and doing them effectively so that you end up with that product, final essay, that is as successful or as effective as it can be. So I'm not collecting that outline, but that doesn't mean it's not important. And really all of the points that are in the final essay kind of reflect your engagement doing this kind of stuff. So there's no points directly for the outline, but if you don't do it, that will show up in the final essay, and that's where you lose those points. So it's sort of like there are points, but they just don't get attached to this particular, individual assignment. They're all rolled into that final product. Clearly you have a lot of time now to be working on this if you factor in spring break, but a number of you then are still working on the topic part, so you don't want to get too far into outlining and all that other stuff. But it's not like you have to have a perfectly crafted thesis before moving forward. If you know kind of what general theme you're interested in, what texts you're going to use, you can still move forward with doing some basic brainstorming, even starting the writing, the actual physical drafting, even if you don't have that thesis really clarified in your mind. In fact, ironically, often the thesis really becomes crystallized in the act of writing. Even though we don't know exactly what we want to say, sometimes you have to say it and then work backwards and realize what the thesis is. So even if your topic isn't perfect yet, don't let that stop you from moving forward in the writing process. Again, two sides to that, right? You do want to be in touch with me pretty soon about clarifying a topic, at least to some degree, that will allow you to move forward effectively. So making sure you're covering a text that's going to work in a way that's going to work and all that kind of stuff. So Unit 10, again, you can look through it. It has the basic outlining, gets you started. There's a discussion board where you're posting my topic here, and again, it could be tentative still, but we do have a fair amount of time to be working on this if you factor in spring break. So you should have lots of time to go back and forth and really refine a topic for you, if not an outright thesis, that will set you up for success for that final paper, and that's really the goal that we're looking for. So get into Unit 10. As I say, revisit Unit 9 to look at those essay guidelines again. Do that on a regular basis just to make sure you're actually doing the assignment and not something else. And by all means, be in touch with me with other questions, but particularly anything related to your topic and then ultimately your thesis. Have a good spring break, and I'll talk to everybody soon.